Welcome to the UI experience. Welcome to the UI experience.
Good afternoon, UI. Real talk for real people with real problems. Fans, welcome to the daily edition of Real Talk with Jalal. And that is myself, yours truly. I'm scrolling through some things. That's why I'm kind of halfway pausing because I'm trying to find something. But in any event, I welcome everybody to today's show. I think we got some fairly good topics, and I'm glad I'm joined by my two partners in consciousness. Today I got TB. And today I also have the return of the Mac, the return of the Pat. Patrick Irvine is here, and I'm especially glad that he's here, too, because he does the same thing I do, which is, work with wayward youth and try and bring them back to the straight path. And he can probably shed a lot of insight into our first topic. But before we go there, I'm sorry. Before I almost forgot, UI Jane is here. And she can also add a more of a personal type note on this particular subject as well. But before I get to the first subject, as usual, I want to advise everyone out there to go to urbanintellectuals.com/members. And for the low price of $24 a year, $2 a month, you can become a member, a card-carrying member of Urban Intellectuals. Or if you don't want to be a member but you just still want to donate to something that's bigger than yourself, you can go to urbanintellectuals.com/members. If you don't remember that, we repeat it throughout the show. Plus, if you go to the page, it's also on the page. So first things first, let's get into this first topic. I read a very spirited and informative discussion on the page last night concerning the trials and tribulations of one Jameis Winston. And if nobody knows who Jameis Winston is, if, say, for instance, you've been, captured by the Taliban or something for the last couple of years or so, Jameis Winston, or Jameis, I keep wanting to call him James, but Jameis Winston is the current reigning national champion, most valued, most outstanding player in the college football championship game for Florida State. But he seems to be a tad bit, I don't want to say immature or childish. He seems to be a normal kid. And he seems to be performing behaviors that normal kids do. Those of us who have sons, mine is fortunately not old enough to get itself into situations of this magnitude, but I can see it coming by things that I see in his behavior at the age of 8. Additionally, those of us who can remember back to when they were 18, 19, 20 years old, there was a whole lot of stuff that if we would have been a public figure of that magnitude, a lot of people would have been looking at us with the side eye as well. 18-year-old kids do 18-year-old kid things. But in any event, he's been performing some behaviors that a lot of people have called questionable. Now, over the last couple of days, I don't know exactly when it was. I didn't look that deep into it because I thought it was a complete piece of bullshit. Ex-Heisman Trophy winner Bo Jackson put him on blast on national TV on the Jim Rome show, ESPN, and basically told him that he was through with him, that he's not going to try and give him any more advice, that, he's not listening, basically words to the effect that he's a big old knucklehead and I wash my hands of the situation. I give up. I guess my question to our esteemed panel is that the right course of action? I'm of the mind that if you're going to do something like that, you keep it in-house. You call his parents and you tell his parents that, hey, look, I ain't messing with your son no more because he don't know what he's doing, But I think it's in bad form when you basically tell the United States basically, a personal situation, to put a personal situation out there like that when it's an 18, 19-year-old kid, you know. Now, if he was beefing with Barry Sanders or somebody of his same age group, you know, and they might have had a disagreement at an autograph signing, you know, table or something. Now, that's a different thing. That's you and another grown man, but you putting a little bitty kid, basically, because regardless of his athletic prowess, he is still a kid. So my thoughts was always, what does everybody think about that? And this time we're gonna do ladies first. Jane, if you are in the position to, you know, make a comment, what would you say to this whole situation?
I agree wholeheartedly. That's why one of the reasons why I posted the article, because I instantly got upset with Bo Jackson. At the end of the day, whether Jameis listened or not, that shouldn't have been said on national TV, because once it comes time for them to turn his back on him, once the white dominant society has used him up and his ability no longer is wanted, they're always going to go back to that. They always need a token black guy to agree with how they feel, to make however they're feeling is feel justified, because guess what? Hey, the black man said it. He's out of control. He can't get along. People can't get along with him. He won't do right. And how we're not just saying this. Here's Bo Jackson saying this. First of all, I know Bo Jackson could easily reach out to him. They're from the same hometown that I'm from. It's no more than 30,000, I think. It's not that big. So with that being said, everybody know who Jameis' father is. He lives right around the corner from my brother. Bo Jackson could easily go to that man's or to Jameis' father and say, hey, here's my plan. I want to help your son. This is what I have, and this is what I plan to do. Can you help me with helping him? Because first of all, he's approaching this young man probably in an authoritative manner versus I'm here to help you manner, or, let's hang out, let's get to know one another. Then I could see and assess the problem and see what's going wrong. First of all, he was playing for the all-black school in the area. That he was in an all-black area playing for that school, and once he got really large, he started playing for the predominantly white school. And when you get that big, that the predominantly white schools start to look at you to play for their high school, they will let you get away with a lot of stuff. They tend to give you a sample of that white privilege because you're playing for them. You're making them look good. You're making their school look good. You're bringing in money because people are coming to watch this young man play. So Bo Jackson, in my opinion, should have assessed all that, figured out the situation, sat down with him and talked to him. I have an issue with Bo Jackson, A, going on ESPN, telling this to the world, and 2, letting the world know that he's giving up on a black man. He's still a boy at the end of the day. He still has boy ways of thinking because he's doing things that kids do, stealing the juice, the soda from Burger King, him stealing the crab legs, little stuff like that. He's behaving like a little boy. Now, the rape allegation, that's something within its own, beast of its own. But for this black man to go on a national TV show and let the world know that he's giving up on this young black man, that's the world can say, hey, you know what, I can give up on the young black kids because guess what? Black men give up on black kids all the time. If he didn't go in it using his heart, he shouldn't have did it at all. And to me, when Bo Jackson went in it, he wasn't going in to use his heart. Maybe he had good intentions at first, I don't know, but good intentions never change. You don't have good intentions one day and then decide to go on ESPN the next day and dog someone's character out, dog them out and dog the situation out. So, yes, I'm with you on that, Kenneth. I have an issue all day long with the way he handled this situation. Bo Jackson was dead wrong. That's something that we should have never known, that Bo Jackson was tutoring him, unless Florida State released it. Other than that, Bo Jackson had no right going on TV dogging this young black man out.
Okay. And I want to put another little branch on that fire, another piece of wood on that fire. One of the other things that I found as kind of odd about the whole situation was when Jim Rome was actually interviewing him, he basically asked Bo Jackson, well, what are some of the things that you were telling him? How were you trying to mentor him? And the first thing Bo Jackson said was, well, that's personal. I'm not going to get off into that, and I'm not going to tell you what was said between me and him because that's personal. But, he's just not listening, and because she's not listening, I'm just going to take myself out of the whole equation. And I said, okay, well, if it was a personal thing between you and Jameis, and you were, truly trying to help this young brother because you knew what he was getting ready to go through, then the whole thing should have been personal. It should never have been an interview with Jim Rome that got to that magnitude, because now they reckon the poor brother over the coals. And brings to mind a second point too, and I want to bring you in on this, Patrick, because like I said, you and me in basically the same business. The thing about this whole situation that I find disheartening is that now white America and the white media want to basically destroy this young man and point to all of the negative things that he has done, when y'all are the ones who actually created this beast called Jameis Winston. Because if you look at it like this, I don't see him as being, prone to criminality or, mentally ill, anything like that. What I see is that a brother is cracking. That, like U.I. James said, he's from Bessemer, Alabama, and there's not a whole lot of people. That's a very small fish bowl. Yeah, he's a big fish in that little bitty fish bowl, but I can point to, oh my God, Todd Marinerovich. Terry, you'll remember who he was, but I can point to numerous individuals who come from similar situations like that, real small town, the high school jock or whatever, but when he made the big time and the cameras got in their face, they cracked. I look at that situation, Jameis' situation, in that same way. These are cries for help, because this is not even really rational stuff that he's doing, getting on the banquet table and fucking right in the pussy, Yeah, it's a viral video thing that's going around or whatever, but dude, really? I think it's a cry for help. Patrick, what do you think about giving up on brothers at the first sign of intransience or the first sign that they really don't want to hear what you got to say?
I think this whole Bo Jackson incident, and you definitely want to, at first glance, I want to say this, Jameis Winston definitely has some issues that he needs to deal with, and he definitely needs to be held accountable for those issues. But to the Bo Jackson situation, the whole approach seems wrong to me. As I hear about Bo Jackson reaching out, like, I don't know if Bo and Jameis has had any long-term relationship, but I read an article earlier that said that Bo Jackson said he talked to him like he was his father. Now, if you guys don't have a long-term relationship, you can't just walk up to these kids and start talking to them like your daddy. That's step one wrong right away. They don't give a damn who you are. They don't care. You're not daddy and I don't know you. So just from that, and then, I read somewhere else that when the reporter asked him what he said something to the effect of, it probably cinched the hair off your ears if I told you what I told him. Yeah, that's not really the best way to talk to somebody. I mean, if you can't repeat what you said for fear of singeing the hairs off somebody's ears, I mean, it's one thing to keep it real, and it's another thing to just be overly stupid about whatever it is you're saying. And when you say that I can't repeat what I said to him because it probably cinched the hairs off your ears, to me that seems like you might have crossed the line somewhere. And I think you crossed the line. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have any problems with repeating it. So just by reading those few things that I've read, I begin to question Bo Jackson's motives altogether for trying to reach out to this young man. I mean, never mind him going on national TV and pretty much blasting the man out like that. Never even mind that. But just looking at how he says he approached the Jameis situation, it either shows somebody that wasn't really interested in helping this young man, and maybe was interested in just gaining some more publicity or getting back in the limelight or whatever the case may be, or it shows somebody that's really out of touch with talking to people, that has zero emotional IQ. You know, you struggle to figure out which one it is, but in either case, it's not somebody that should be reaching out to other people. I agree with you. I think Jameis Winston is issuing, I think all of this are cries for help. I don't know much about the whole rape thing, but all of these other reports that he's had, all these other things he's been in the headlines for, I think they're all just cries for help. I think when you get to, and this is not even just football players, because, again, I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. That's where FSU is located, for those that don't know. FAMU is there as well. It's a big shock for a lot of people coming out of small towns and coming into FSU. You even see a sort of a culture shock when people come out of small towns and go into FAMU. Tallahassee is not that big, but FSU is huge. So the city itself is not that big. So they might be fine when they're driving around on campus, and people that live in the city don't really realize how big FSU is because we've been there our whole lives. It's not until, like for me, it wasn't until I stepped foot on FSU's campus that I realized the magnitude of this institution. This is a huge institution, and it comes with its own aura. And here you have somebody, a young man from a small town who has never really been given anything like what he's being given now, and he's going to walk into this situation, and nobody has prepared him from it. Nobody has mentored him on it. Nobody has counseled him on it. Nobody has talked to him even about the culture of what he's going to walk into. He's just kind of thrown in there into this gigantic magnitude of colossalness that is FSU and that is NCAA Division I football. And then he's just kind of let loose. It's like taking a fish that was the biggest fish in his little lake, his little man-made lake, his little backyard pool, and dropping him in the ocean. And he's having trouble. He isn't coping well. And in my opinion, all of these things are cries for attention. But nobody is going to acknowledge that because it's so much easier to just lump it on him and say he's stupid for blowing his opportunity. Maybe he doesn't see it the same way you see it. To say he's behaving like a child. Well, we kind of raise our 20-year-olds to be children nowadays, so you can't really fault them for that. I mean, kids standing on tables screaming out Vine videos. I can't tell you how many high schools I've gone into and heard kids screaming out Vine videos. So you say, well, he should know better because he's in a position to where the limelight is always on him. He's 20 years old. He doesn't care about the limelight, and he doesn't think that it's that big of a deal because everybody's doing it. That's the excuse you're going to get from every young adult to an older teenager. That's the excuse you're going to get. Everybody's doing it. I don't see what the big deal is. I don't think anything has really been explained to him as far as the seriousness of being the starting quarterback at a national championship team. I don't think anything has been explained to him about how big and how focused everything is on him and how he isn't allowed to be a child anymore. When he signed on to go to FSU, you signed off on them removing the rest of your adolescence and your young adult years. That's what you signed up for. They give you fame, they take your youth. That's the exchange. But I don't think anybody has broken that down for him.
You know what, Patrick? Jameis carries that team. Not to take away from any of the other players. They have a decent defense, all of that. But he is the star of that team. Heisman Trophy winner his freshman year. He makes that team. So, again, with that, it comes perks. Come to find out, they're saying Florida State covered up the alleged rape because guess what? They knew what the consequences would be had they lost Jameis as a quarterback. He's outstanding at the position that he does. But the thing of it is, he was never a star investment, only because he was an average player because where I'm from, we produce football players. We have a lot of players that go pro. But he was just average. We didn't really look at him until he went to Florida State. Now, don't get me wrong, he was good, I guess, in academics and ball-wise. But for the most part, we do produce a lot of great football players because that's all we have there. We don't produce anything academically, but we're good at playing football. Shoot, I can play football, and I'm a girl.
But see, here's also where you draw the line there. Or here's another point of mention that I was going to stay away from, but you brought it up. FSU has the capabilities of covering things up. Now, the question has to be asked at this point whether they have given up on trying to cover things up or whether it's just gotten to the point that he's just doing so much that they can't cover it up anymore. But I don't think it's a case of him. I think academically he's an intelligent person, at least from his high school scores and whatnot. He came into a good system. He came into a good city. Tallahassee is a football city. There are more than a few NFL pro players from Tallahassee. We all know FSU has a long list of alumni that are in the NFL, that have gone through the NFL at least. So, he should be in a place where he can get mentorship and guidance. But another point here is the fact that from what I'm hearing from the guys back home that do mentor, the coaches aren't giving people access to this kid. Like, not the people that can really help, not the people that really want to benefit this kid. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that's what I'm hearing, that they're having a hell of a time gaining access to this kid so that they can talk to him, so that they can mentor him. Because there are a lot of people in Tallahassee that have mentoring programs, that do work with the local high schools, that are fighting and chomping at the bit to get at Jameis Winston, because it pains a lot of people to see him going through the things he's going through with what looks to be no real assistance.
Right. Now, see, this is my
thing.
But
get this, he has a mentoring camp in Bessemer. This past summer while I was there, I started to take my son to meet him, but my son isn't into sports. But he has his own football camp mentoring little boys. So the irony of that.
Well, I think it's more than just. I think it's bigger than Jameis Winston, because the one thing that people are not talking about, but it's a very real reality of that situation is that when you get to that level, forget Florida State. Florida State hasn't been a national power. They've been anywhere from number 10 to number 15 for ever since the Bowden era was over. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden they're back at the pinnacle of college football, and especially with the new rules that's coming in, this year, next year, whatever, where they're going to the playoff system. People just don't realize how many billions of dollars an arm like Jameis Winston brings into Tallahassee and into FSU in particular. That's why they building that wall around him. They really don't give a. They could care less. He could kill some people. They don't give a damn because he's making them money. But here's where the trick comes in. I don't know how many people have been following this, but the NCAA has passed a bunch of anti-rape rules across the country, and they've got all of these major universities under the spotlight and putting them under a microscope for these allegations of rape against these basketball players, against these football players, against these baseball players, because I think Jameis Winston was playing baseball at the time when the alleged rape happened, and he got suspended from that team, so he can't even play for that team. But then again, they're not of the level of the football program. So it remains to be seen whether or not all of this will be taken care of by the time, the national championship rolls around. But because of that spotlight and because of that microscope, there's no more sweeping stuff up under the rug. There's now become cracks in this situation because they're asking for records. The FBI is getting involved. The feds is getting involved. And when the feds get involved, they looking at every period. They're looking at every dot on every I and every cross on every T. And they're finding out things like, okay, well, she made this allegation. We have always said that she didn't, but now we're finding out that she did. And which is not to take away from the fact that the brother might be not guilty of what she claimed that he did, because, the bigger star you are, the bigger target that's on your back, And for years and years and years, the mantra and the motto on especially most major colleges is, no means no, which is cool, but a lot of women say, no, the motto should be yes means yes. Because no means no can be taken a whole lot of ways. You didn't specifically tell me I can't. You told me, and there we go. You see what I'm saying? So all of that has to play into it as well. But like you said, Patrick, there are people out there that could possibly help him, but the university is keeping that wall around him because, as I don't know exactly how you do, but knowing you and knowing our relationship, I'm imagining that you are probably, close to me in lines of how you go at these kids. First thing we talk about is personal responsibility. Stepping up, take your weight. If you did some stupid shit, raise your hand and say, okay, well, I'm sorry, I did some stupid shit and I'll never do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that wall around him at FSU is keeping him from saying, yeah, okay, well, I kind of messed up a little bit and I'm sorry about that. They don't want you to comment on it, because it brings a negative light on their billion-dollar industry. Terry, I need to bring you in here because I haven't heard you today. What do you think, my friend? Todd Maravich, the one played for the Raiders. You know who I'm talking about.
Todd. Prototype.
Yeah, Todd.
Prototype.
Yeah, Todd Marinovich. Yeah, the golden boy. Well, people like him, obviously, his story was one that involved, alcohol and drugs, and so he found himself out of the NFL because he wound up having a drug issue. Let's talk about Jameis. Jameis Winston's situation, to me, doesn't really involve placing blame any place other than with Jameis Winston. Bo Jackson is a sidebar. Bo Jackson got on TV and said, I tried to help the kid, and, he just didn't seem to want to listen. I agree with what Patrick said. I think it depended on how you went at him. If you came at him harsh, tried to be rough and tough and give him the tough love spiel, then that's, you went at it the wrong way. Instead of just saying, Jameis, would you mind if I just, sit down and have a little rap with you for a while? And just kind of get you to understand, man, the spotlight is on you. So I think the way he went about it behind closed doors is what turned Jameis off. And so Bo got offended, what it seems like to me, when Jameis didn't respond the way Bo thought he should to the tough love spiel. And then he went on TV and said, well, I tried to talk to the kid, but, it just seems like he ain't listening. So just in that sense, Bo could have went at it a different way. As far as Jameis Winston himself, the excuses about small town is garbage. It just simply is. He's not the only person to come from a small town. The great Walter Payton, who's my personal football hero, always has been and always will be, came from Columbia, Mississippi, raised by two parents in a very small town, and did not go to a major school. He went to Jackson State and then wound up going to the Bears. No sexual assaults from him, no gun complaints, no shoplifting complaints, not standing up on tables at Jackson State hollering out obscene things. And there are others who came from small towns that were not involved in these kinds of, childish antics. So the responsibility is on the young man himself. He's not mentally retarded. He doesn't suffer from autism. He's not mentally disturbed or deranged. And he has two parents, both with the same last name. So I'm assuming that, they're married. They have a responsibility in how they brought him up and what they've taught him as well. So now for him to be out here in the spotlight, and if he's cracking under the pressure, okay, the parents need to get to him and let him understand, this is what we need to do to get you back in line. But for everybody on the outside to start to come and try to say their little 2 cents worth of opinion, it doesn't matter because it starts where he lives, and that's at home with mom and dad. So I would just be curious to really see what the parents have said to him and how they're getting at him and trying to have him understand he has to rein himself in. The sexual assault complaint came in December of 2012. And supposedly the young lady, recanted and said she didn't want to go forward. But I just think that there's more to that than meets the eye. I think, number one, because the person who investigated this original charge did private work for Florida State. He was a booster, and he was a primary financier of Florida State athletics. So that tells you right there that you gotta kind of really look hard at was there some type of a cover up that FSU was involved in because of this officer's involvement. The gun complaint. Again, you're on campus being silly. You bring a BB gun on campus and you start, letting off some rounds at squirrels. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Come on, Jameis, really? And then shoplifting. You're going into Burger King and stealing soda. And now you stealing crab legs. And then you get up on the table and start hollering this ignorant stuff. And now the latest is that you're signing autographs in exchange for pay, which you clearly know at the age of 20 is a violation of the NCAA rules. So personal responsibility is where I'm always going to put it unless the person has some type of mental problem, unless you truly were raised by wolves. I mean, it's personal responsibility. Jameis Winston knows the position that he's in. When he stood up and accepted the Heisman Trophy, he spoke very clearly, very articulately, said he was proud and he wanted to do good. Right. So he knows what he's doing. It's just that he needs to decide, okay, I have to get over being young. Michael Irvin did the same thing. Michael Irvin was partying and drinking and snorting coke and acting a fool, and Deion Sanders did the same thing. I mean, we all understand being young, but he needs to hurry up and mature before there is this thing where they go at him and say, we're going to see if we can do what we can to keep you from reaching the top in the NFL. But I put it on personal responsibility, not on Bo Jackson or anybody else.
Okay. And I agree with 90% of that. 10% of that, I think that, I don't know, drawing on my...
Well, you just said. Well, remember now. You just said personal responsibility too.
Of course.
Right. So again, we were in the middle. We were 18 and 19. We were in the Army at the time. You were in the Marines. I was in the Army. So look at what we were doing at that age. Okay, we were responsible for our own actions, and we knew that.
Right.
Okay, and we came from single parent households, and wasn't no dad around us. So come on. We knew what we were doing at 18 and 19. So right. It shouldn't be any excuse for him.
Right. But
this
is the difference.
You know what? You can't base, and this is just me personally, and I've said it several times, I used to judge off of everything I've been through in my childhood and the decisions I made based off of somebody and what they should have done. You can't always do that because, again, for the most part, maybe some things in life that you saw at an early childhood because you came from a single-parent home, he didn't get a chance to experience. Maybe he didn't get a chance to be that man because guess what? When you don't have a man in the house for a young male, you have to be the man of the house. Whether it's told to you or not, those are certain expectations. But when you have a father in a home, guess what you don't have to do sometimes? You don't have to be that man of the house because your father's being that man. But I am curious as to how his parents feel, and I can find out and get that with you guys. But I was watching ESPN one day, and this is with the crab leg thing, I think, or before it happened, and they said that his father had been trying to reach out to FSU to figure out what was going on with his son because he was, and I actually didn't like what his father said. His father said he needs someone watching his son to see what's going on. I actually had a fit about that because no one should be watching your son at that age. I joined the Navy when I was 17. Just because I joined the Navy when I was 17 and I was responsible don't mean I should hold every 17-year-old girl to those same standards. Those were my standards. Everybody's bar shouldn't be on yours. Some should be above and some should be below. But I think it's always unfair to judge what people should do based off of what you've done. Because everybody's not going to think the same. You can have two people in the same household, and they still don't think the same. But also, I think his father is trying, but from even thinking about what his father said, what ESPN said his father said about a year ago or earlier this year. Florida State has a wall so thick that his father seemingly can't get all the way through.
Right. And see, this is the thing that I would point out as well. We're talking about a difference in magnitude of pressure. You know, yeah, we all come up, you know, hard scrabble. We all kind of hard and all that, right? But who's to say how we would have reacted if we would have been in a position where the world was at our feet as well at 18, 19, 20 years old? You know, we were responsible because we didn't have a choice in the matter. We had to be responsible because it was only us. You know, we worked for everything that we had. We had to struggle for everything that we ended up getting. Whereas in a situation like this, make no bones about it. The press might say it, the media might say it, the colleges might say it, that these players are not paid. That's some bullshit. These players are paid. These players got perks at that level with that amount of talent. They got perks that, you know, the average person that worked their whole life will never see at 50 years old. You see what I'm saying? And who's to say that the pressure of that bubble that he's in is not making him crack? Yeah, personal responsibility, I agree, 100%. Totally agree. Absolutely. Personal responsibility is important. But personal responsibility only goes a certain way when there's outside pressure being applied to you, because you never know what you might do. And I always, when I talk to kids, I always tell them this. Look, you can try and be as upstanding as you want to be. I understand. When you're hungry, that will make you do things that you never would have thought that you would do. If you have children to feed, that will make you do things that your personal responsibility ethics that you have built your whole life would have never dreamed that you would do. You know, so personal responsibility, yes, but personal responsibility, yeah, okay, that could be fudged to a certain extent. You know, and we all would like to think that if we was in the same position that we would thrive in a situation like that. And who's to say we wasn't? We wouldn't. We probably would thrive in a situation like that. But until you're walking in the shoes of Jameis, Mr. Winston, until you're walking in his shoes, you can't really say what you will or what you won't do. Patrick, what do you think, or how much influence do you think being the number one college athlete, the number one seller of jerseys with your name on it in the country, and a probable looking to be, especially if he can straighten his shit out, but the probable number one pick in the draft, depending on which team actually gets that first pick. What do you think all of those pressures do to a person of that age?
Well, I can speak from limited experience, both as I was a high school standout in track. Obviously, there's a vast amount of difference between getting attention for being a track standout and getting attention for being a collegiate athlete of the magnitude that Jameis is. But it depends on how the person is structured, how they were raised. I've seen some kids who have the world at their feet and they're responsible enough and they take advantage of it. And most of the time these are kids who are getting offers to do tremendous things through the sciences or through academics. Very rarely is it through athletics, because for the most part, those athletic kids are kind of protected and insulated from their mistakes until such a time as they're thrown away. And then all their mistakes come rushing back. So in a lot of the at-risk work that I end up dealing with kids who never even really got a chance to showcase their athletic ability because of their intellectual ability. But once they began to thrive intellectually and had the world thrown at their feet because of the, if you will, as much as you can as an academic, because of the adversity they had experienced, they were able to deal with it. I don't know much about Jameis's backstory, but I can say this. If he hasn't dealt with much adversity, and I don't care how awesome of parents you have, nothing can teach you character like life. If he hasn't dealt with anything that has seriously tested and developed his character, be it a course that he was failing and a teacher that was completely unforgiving that he had to make a way through, or whatever the case may be, I don't know what it, you name it, the teenagers, the biggest things or the smallest things become character-defining moments for them. If he hasn't dealt with anything like that, and then to have the world thrown at his feet like it has been, if he hasn't been prepared by his parents and by his life cycle growing up, it can be catastrophic. I mean, the ego can run rampant. And I think with a lot of young people, that's what they struggle with, is dealing with their ego, containing their God complex. And even in this case, it seems like, with everyone telling him, #1 draft pick, millions of dollars, Heisman winner at freshman, undefeated, 19-0 in starts. You're like the god of football, blah, 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 blah. You're redefining a school. You're bringing a state back to national prominence. You're bringing a program that has a very prestigious history back to the light. You are the son of God. Yeah, I could see ego running rampant a little bit in that situation.
Pretty much. And we're going to have to move on because we done went way over on this particular subject, and this might be something that we'll deal with later on, because I want to, at one time in the future, I want to deal with, okay, well, how do you get through to individuals like, not necessarily just like Jameis Winston, but we know 1,000 young brothers that's running around the hood that's going through that same thing, that are nowhere near on the level of a Jameis Winston, but, they might have a few dollars in their pocket because they might have a little side hustle or what have you, and they just out of control. So I kind of want to deal with that, but we'll deal with that at a different time. Topic number 2. Another interesting question that was posed on the page, and Brother Leon Collins asked me what my particular position was on it, and at the time, both my computers was updating, and I couldn't get to it. My D is, for some odd strange reason, got a dead zone above it, so I can't use my phone. I don't like to use my phone for long posts anyway, but I get to it in print in a while. But his question was, should we be thinking about closing certain of the smaller, less profitable HBCUs, I forget what the actual acronym is, historically black colleges and universities, some of the smaller ones, and basically taking that effort and trying to expand and improve upon the ones that are not failing, taking away from the Elizabeth State here and, giving that money and those resources to a Howard or a Spelman or something like that. So I kind of wanted to deal with that question. In my opinion, I think that one of our biggest problems as a people is we fail to look at certain situations like what they are. They're businesses, and it's just like if you own a nationwide chain of stores. If you have stores that are failing, Radio Shack, I give you a good example. Radio Shack has 2,500 stores. At one time, they had over 4,800 stores. There was never a time anywhere in America that you were outside of 1 mile of a Radio Shack. Sometimes they was 3 blocks away, And what Radio Shack did when they started failing is they started closing stores to make the stores that were profitable even more profitable. And I think it's the same thing with historically black colleges and universities. I think that it is time to start thinking about closing some of those smaller schools, even though, they got alumni that's going to scream. I screamed at the top of my lungs when I found out they was closing my black high school. When Roosevelt closed, Roosevelt was nationally known as one of the better all black high schools in America, both athletically as well as intellectually or academically. But what had to be done had to be done. Nothing lasts forever. So I was kind of wanting to gauge you guys' thoughts on if y'all thought that was a good idea. And for this one, I'm gonna go to Patrick for this one first, because he has a bit of experience with those type of colleges.
Well,
knowing people at least.
Well, Brother Leon did bring up a good point, which is the mismanagement at HBCUs. That's real. And black people, we need to deal with that because that's real. Like that, and that's not just coming from somebody that was a student. That's coming from somebody that knows presidents and vice presidents, and that has seen, now I won't say all of the inner workings, but I've seen a lot of the inner workings of HBCUs at a lot of different institutions, FAMU, to name one, Howard, Hampton. Those institutions are not run well. The bigger ones are doing better, but the smaller ones are just atrocious. But as to the money aspect, I don't agree with that for the simple fact that HBCUs, the larger schools, are already getting the majority of the funds. So closing the smaller schools down and assuming, and here's the big thing, you would be making an assumption that the money that would have gone to the smaller schools are going to go to the bigger schools. And more often than not, that wouldn't play out. More often than not, that money would be funneled back into federal programs to go back to TWIs, or traditionally white institutions. So I disagree with it for that, because he's saying let's close down some of the less profitable schools so that we can send some of that money to the more prominent schools, and trying to create a flagship program or a flagship school of the level of some of the more prestigious TWIs. Another problem with that is funding in and of itself has a lot to do with education, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with your institution becoming a TWI. That has a lot to do with the success of your alumni and their given fields. So you can't just assume that if you give FAMU more money, they will eventually achieve the level of a Harvard, because Harvard got that way by having successful alumni build connections. And those connections are what gives Harvard its prestige. Those connections are also what gives Harvard its a lot of its funding. So if we really want a black flagship program on the level of a Harvard or a Yale or whatever the case may be, the first thing we need to do is get the alumni to band together and actually build something, instead of going to work for people that graduated from Harvard, Yale, or these other institutions. They need to build something, and they need to create avenues for other people to build. And as they build, the program they graduated from will gain more prestige that way. But again, funding is not distributed in the way a lot of people think when they think the smaller schools receive a lot of money for being small. That's simply not true. The bigger schools receive more money. Not only do they receive more money because they have more students, but they actually receive more money per student. And this has been proven in study after study after study. And there's another issue here that needs to be covered as well, which is, and I know he talked about North Carolina A&T in one of the comments. I was breezing through it, and I wanted to comment, but I didn't. But here's something, right? And I know this because I live in this area. North Carolina State University in Raleigh is a TWI. It receives about $16,000 per student. North Carolina A&T, which is obviously a HBCU, is an hour away, and it receives $7,800 per student. You see that huge gap in front? Like, why don't we work on closing that gap before we start closing down HBCUs? Why don't we make the gap between TWIs and HBCUs a little bit more equitable, and then we can start talking about closing down other institutions of higher learning. But I don't agree with the thought of closing them down with the expectation and the assumption that that money is going to get funded into other schools, and by using that funding, those schools are going to be successful. Because again, we also have to consider the fact that there's a mismanagement issue. So if you throw a bunch of money at a management problem, your money is going to disappear.
That's for sure. And you're correct. There is a common assumption that's made that, there's these two pots of dollars, one for TWIs and one for HBCUs, and that those monies don't mix. That if you take away the number of hands that's outstretched to that pool of money, then that means that there's going to be more money for everybody around. But you are correct. That's not how it works. The way federal funding works is they have a set amount of dollars that's set aside for funding universities, and everybody gets a little bit of it. And I think my biggest problem with the whole, not closing them is not so much, that the money is going to go anywhere or, changing the level of funding to make it more equitable. My biggest problem is this. These universities, for every one successful student that they're turning out a bunch of failures. They're turning out people who have degrees, yes, but they have no plan. They have no future. This is not everybody. I got a bunch of friends that they went to, these universities or what have you. I didn't. I went to Ball State, and I went to Villanova, and, I went to a couple of other places. But that's me. I just never was really into the whole I want to go to a black college type thing, because it didn't really mean much to me at that time of my life when I was going to school. But so this is not a disparagement on anybody that went to one of these schools, but just like there are failures that come out of Indiana University, there are failures that come out of Howard. Just like there are failures that come out of Harvard, there are failures that come out of Morehead State. Everybody that graduates from Morehead State is not a Morehead man. Some people just got C's, you know what I mean? Some people slip by, got that piece of paper. But what do you do with that piece of paper? Like you say, it's about connections. It's about, the prestige of the institution that you went to. You can go further, rightly or wrongly, you can go further with a degree from Harvard than you can with a degree from Howard. I don't give a damn what your major was. That's just the way it is, because there's this common perception that you are taught better at a Harvard or at Yale than you are at a Morehead State or a Spelman or something like that. We know that might not necessarily be the truth, but the way the world works, that name recognition goes a long way on whether or not you're going to be successful.
And you know what, Kenneth? Let me say this one thing real quick, and then I'm done. We again, and I want to emphasize this point again. The prestige of your college degree has a lot to do with the prestige of the alumni that went through before you.
Yes, sir.
And the funding of a lot of these HBCUs is not matching up when you consider alumni funding to FAMU versus alumni funding to Harvard. Black people largely aren't giving back to the HBCUs they graduated from. So we have a bunch of other issues we can address before we go and start begging the government for more money or start closing down schools or this, that, and the third. If you graduated from an HBCU, give back as an alumni. Build in your career field and create a prestigious network so that your alumni looks more, or your school looks more prestigious because you graduated from it. That's how you do these things. It's not by shutting down other schools, alienating more opportunities. I mean, yeah, these schools might only produce, or these schools might only have 55, 60, 70, 80 students, but you ever think maybe those 60, 70, 80 students couldn't get into college anywhere else? And maybe those 60, 70, 80 students, maybe half of them are going to go on and create life-changing cures and life-changing technologies and life-changing. I'm just not a fan of closing down opportunities for advancement just to divert money to other opportunities for advancement that may or may not actually exist. I'd rather fix what we have than, I mean, if we're going to scrap stuff, let's scrap it all. Let's throw it all out and start from scratch anyway, because you want to be honest, HBCUs ain't none of them doing their job, period. But anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's a whole other conversation right there. TB, you get the last word, man, because we run a low on time.
All right, I appreciate it. In this case, I can say I have experience with black colleges in Baltimore. Worked for Morgan as a broadcaster and went to Coppin. And I saw the difference in both of those schools and how the funding was distributed. Coppin was the stepchild. It was a smaller college. It was a teacher's college. The focus was on producing social workers and nurses, whereas Morgan had the prestige. And so they got all the money from the state, and Coppin would get very little. It does come down primarily to not depending on the state's money, but depending on the private money that comes from alums and donors, because they are the ones that can actually help drive the school to be successful. But if they become successful and then move on and forget that the school ever existed, the school is going to have a tough time surviving. So what would have to happen is not necessarily say, let's close all the schools, because 11 black colleges that I know of have already closed their doors. They just simply couldn't make it. But the money is not going to automatically then be distributed to other, quote, HBCUs. They would just fund that money off into other schools, period. So the private money is what would be needed from black folks who have made it. I mean, we got a lot of rich black folks that came from HBCUs, but they won't turn around and give back, $1,000 a year, or they won't even commit, $1,000 every 2 years. They just simply don't contribute anything, and it's very difficult for the schools to make it. So I see it being tough unless you have some people who graduated from these schools decide that I'm going to turn around and contribute a great deal of money back to the school that helped me to get my degree.
And I think as we close this subject, this is probably something that we probably need to deal with at a longer time too, but we got so involved with Jameis that we never really got a chance to really hit this the way it needs to be hit. But you also got to think about it like this too. A lot of people that go to HBCUs on the undergraduate level then turn around and spend their academic prowess into going to a Harvard or to a Yale for their graduate degree, University of Chicago or San Diego State or Caltech or somewhere like that. And they do turn around and they do contribute. They do give their alumni dollars because, they get those same emails that we get, I still get emails from Ball State. I ain't been at Ball State in 30 years, 25 years, something like that. It's been that long, but I still get emails from them. They'll turn around and they'll donate to where they got their graduate degree from or their PhD from before they think about the lowly little school that basically got them on track. Because if it hadn't have been for Jackson State, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and graduate and get your master's degree from Notre Dame. But as I said, that's something that we'll come back to and we'll deal with at a later date, because I think we all brought up some really good issues, and I hope that some of the people that were in that particular conversation on the page, I'm hoping that they were able to listen to some of the things that we said, and hopefully that'll spur that conversation further. It is now time for our usual quitting time, and I want to thank everybody that contributed today. I want to thank PI. I want to thank TB. I want to thank UI Jane. I want to thank everybody out there that listened. I want to thank the other 4 to 5 people that basically called into the show. Even though you guys didn't get a chance to say anything, I appreciate you listening, and I hope that you would take what you heard here and carry on that conversation in your normal daily lives with other individuals. And remember, Real Talk with Jalal Tariq is here every day at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. I think that's 2 o'clock on the East Coast and like 5 in the morning in the Philippines or whatever. But I thank everybody for listening and supporting the show. And as usual, I end with the revolution won't be televised, but it must be funded. I urge everybody to go out and become a member, a card-carrying member of Urban Intellectuals. You can go to urbanintellectuals.com/members, and for $24, less than what you'll spend on, cookies and chips over the next week. $24 a year makes you a member of our group, or you can go to urbanintellectuals.com/donate, and you can give to your heart's content. So until tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I want to bid everybody adieu and have a good day and do something positive today.